Good evening. Welcome to Liberty and Justice for All. Tonight we have another presentation for you of actually information that doesn't get printed where it should be printed. Information that you should have. What you do with it's what you do with it. We really don't care. But you should have all the information available. Now, first of all, there have been many people accuse us of doing this show and picking on somebody or some group or something that we don't like. Well, there isn't anything I don't like, actually, except dishonesty or manipulation. So we present any information we get, not to pick on any group, not to pick on any people, not to do anything except present the other side that you don't seem to get. Now what happens, and this is a training that I found by probably the media, that when you're confronted with something, you pick any part of it out and say, I don't like that part of it, therefore I'm not going to listen to the rest of it. If you run across this situation tonight, and tonight we're going to be talking about different religious groups, if you happen to belong to one of them and say, well, I'm not going to listen to the rest of it because I don't like this part, you're doing yourself a great disservice, because the rest of it might apply to you and you might learn to understand. Now, we're not going to pick on Catholics tonight. If we were going to pick on somebody, I'd probably pick on Mormons. But what for? It doesn't matter. We're not picking on anybody. And so understand that if there's one part you don't like, don't dismiss the rest of it. And if there's one part you don't like, call myself or my guest, Eric Phelps, and let's discuss it. And if we're wrong, call us and let's discuss it. And especially if you're in position of authority, quote unquote, we'd love to have you come down and hear your side of it. We've been trying for this for a long time. Nobody seems to want to respond. They just say, well, that's no good what they're saying and it's not true. Well, come on down and tell us why. Anyway, Eric John Phelps, I've been associated with for a year now. He's my guest. His book is going to be out in bound and printed the middle of July. The book is called Vatican Assassins. Sounds like a pretty deep subject. Anyway, Eric, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Nice to be with you.
I'm glad your book's getting out. I've read your manuscript, and while I can say that it didn't exactly frighten me, it was a total different angle, I suppose, on who's running the show. So you've done extensive research, and are you getting any real negative feedback on what you're saying? First of all, I want to make it perfectly clear, and I will vouch for Eric, because I have looked at the documents. What Eric writes in his book isn't theory. What Eric writes in his book is history. And if you get his book, whether you like this or not, you get his book, you're presented with, I understand, close to 7,000 pages of documentation
5,000.
and older books.
5,000.
Right? Huh?
5,000.
5,000. Okay, I exaggerated. 5,000 pages of information with the book itself and with the CD-ROM that comes with it. It's absolutely fascinating, and my main question is, what the hell ever possessed you to do something like this?
Well, I first embarked upon the subject due to a damage with regard to using the King James Bible. People were using other versions, and I didn't think that was a problem until I discovered that the underlying Greek text and Hebrew text were different for all the new versions versus the King James Bible, which led me to research the Westcott and Hort Revision Committee from 1870s to the mid-1880s, and how they brought in a Greek text that was different than the Textus Receptus in over 5,000 places, which then led me to who would do this kind of thing. The next issue was the Lincoln assassination. When I read Burke McCarty's The Suppressed Truth About the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln, published in 1924, and how it very succinctly described the Jesuits as the assassins of President Lincoln, especially their control of John Surratt, who escaped to Alexandria, Egypt, and enlisted in the Pope's Zouave army, and then was brought back here for trial in 1867. The other issue was the assassination of President Kennedy, which grieved me very much when I was in the 4th grade, and I thought from then on I would find out who did it. So off and on through the years I did research and then ultimately find who did it, and why they did it.
Now, the Jesuit order, most people have heard of it, but they don't really know what this is. What is it?
The Jesuit order was started in 1540 by Ignatius Loyola, who was a Spanish nobleman, and it was started to be a military order for the purpose of destroying the Protestant Reformation and bringing back the Pope's Dark Ages, when the Pope ruled the world as the king of the world, particularly all throughout Europe, when all the kings were subject to the Pope. And so that's the starting of the Jesuit order, and it is a militia. It is a military order. It is not simply a religious order. And their purpose was to, in their counter-Reformation with their Council of Trent, to destroy the Reformation and bring back the Dark Ages.
I'm told by our local media and or local sheriff's department and or local district attorney's department that militia is a dirty word.
Well, Ignatius called it his militia. It's been called the light horse of the Pope. It's called the Corps. It's similar to the Marine Corps. In fact, the Marine Corps is patterned after the Jesuit order. No, it is a military order, it is an army, and Napoleon Bonaparte in his memoirs when he was at St. Helena described it as an army when General Montholon wrote his memoirs.
So they have passed down these orders and they still exist today, is that?
The Jesuit order still exists today. It's bigger than ever, more powerful than ever, and it is the Jesuits learn absolute and complete and total obedience to their superior. Their superior is the voice of God, and whatever the superior tells them to do, that's what they must do.
Mm-hmm. But they don't know for sure that this is God speaking.
That's what they're trained to believe.
That's...
And after you go through their spiritual exercises and you're drilled enough, that's what you believe. They're cut away from all their family ties. They're cut away from father and mother, brother, sister. Their family is the order.
So this does this relate to brainwashing?
Sure.
It's
Every 30 days out of the year, the Jesuits have to go to their spiritual exercises and their retreats in various places, and they refocus on what their goal is, and their goal is world government under the Pope of their making, ruling the world from Solomon's rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. That's their goal.
world government. We hear this a lot, and we have all kinds of things coming at us in different ways. In order to rule the world, as I understand, and it makes sense to me, you control the food, you control the health, and you control the money. If you can control those three things, you can control the world.
And all organized religion.
Right.
Islam, everything.
Everything. So the Jesuits are basically controlling or involved in all organized religion?
All centralized organized religion, yes. Anything that has a central governing body, from the Southern Baptists to the Episcopalians to the Presbyterians to the Lutherans, any kind of governing body that's centralized, they will ultimately control through high-level Scottish Rite Freemasonry, which the Jesuits authored.
Okay, so if you're controlling the organized religion, how would you control the money supply?
You control the central bank, just like they did in the reductions in Paraguay. You have a central bank, you control the bank, and everything that proceeds from the bank, especially the credit that it extends, you will then determine what that credit will be spent on. And here it's the military-industrial complex.
Right.
So the Federal Reserve Bank was created, and thus it created the military complex.
Ah, the Federal Reserve, one of my favorites. So the Federal Reserve does in fact control, obviously, the money supply. Well, it's debt money. It's a fiat currency.
It is legal tender. According to the law, it's legal tender, not lawful money.
Right.
Lawful money is gold and silver coin. Legal tender is whatever the Congress wants to make legal tender.
So the Federal Reserve's debt dollar that most people place a value on, they place a value on it because that's what they're told the value is.
That's right. It's all a matter of faith. It's like an indulgence.
Right.
It's paper indulgences. Remember, a dollar is 412 grains of silver.
Right.
It's not a piece of paper.
Exactly. But But we don't know that, or
Well, we weren't
most
taught
people.
anything.
I know. So, but actually people are spending debt. They're trading debt.
Or a nation of thieves. These pieces of paper are created, we're told to use it as money, so you give me a legitimate service, and I steal your labor from you by giving you a Federal Reserve note.
Exactly.
And then somebody performs for you, and you steal their labor from them with your Federal Reserve note. So we're a nation of thieves, and we steal from each other every day.
And then the IRS steals a portion of our labor.
Oh, the purpose for the IRS is just to keep track of
Just-
whatever you've made and whatever you've spent it on,
Right.
so they know where to tighten up and further destroy the middle class.
Yeah. So inflation is a result of the Federal Reserve, not of supply and demand.
Oh, no. Inflation is always created. In fact, inflation is a hidden tax.
Yeah. See, I did a little bit of time in college. You thought I was going to say jail, didn't you? I've done a little time in college, and my professor wouldn't agree with that. He actually taught me in college that supply and demand dictated inflation.
Well,
And I said, I don't think so, and he said that I was wrong, and but he was wrong.
see, anybody that's trained in Keynesian economics, which is what the Federal Reserve is based upon, that's their theory. Well, we know John Maynard Keynes was a wicked and evil man. He was a sodomite. He used to buy the young boys in Morocco and use them for his own personal whims. This very same John Maynard Keynes was at the Treaty of Versailles at the peace when they swindled the Germans. This was a very evil and sinister man, and it's his system of economics is taught in every major university in this country, which is a sheer farce.
So I was taught this, that's what happened in my university. Okay, so they control the money. What about the education?
Same thing.
I mean, all education doesn't come from organized religion. There's a state responsibility for education. I would think it's supposed to be county level, but it's really not. It's federal level. So, are they controlling the federal government?
That's correct. The Jesuits control the federal government through the Council on Foreign Relations.
The CFR again.
CFR. The president of Fordham University, the Jesuit president, is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Okay? And whatever the Jesuits participate in, they control.
So there it trickles down. There's our education problem.
CFR is a trusted third party. The CFR controls housing, education, and welfare.
What about food?
They
What are
control
they
the
doing about that?
Well, they control the food giants. Remember, with the New Deal, they ruined many Midwest farmers and set up in its place these huge, massive corporate farms, so we can all have what I call white man's corporate food.
Mm-hmm.
It's not food. It's white man's corporate food. It's poison. It has no enzymes in it. It is completely devoid of any life. All your milk and butter is pasteurized and homogenized. It's a poison. And you top that off with some vaccinations and immunizations, and you really got some sick people.
Which is exactly what we have.
Yeah.
Now, and this is a little bit off the subject, now there's a lot of talk that they're spraying something from the sky. Is that going on too?
Oh, sure. They spray what they call their chemtrails. And their chemtrails are designed to sicken us and weaken us so that there are 100 million chronically ill Americans, so that we don't have the will to resist a tyranny, nor do we have the will to resist a foreign invasion by the Red Chinese, the Russians, and the Muslims, which they're planning on.
You've got this all documented.
It's all in my book.
All in your book. Okay, so now they got us all sick. But it's a piece of cake. You go to the doctor, he gives you a prescription that makes you unsick, right?
The theory of medicine is completely Jesuitized today. In other words, you can do anything you want, go anywhere you want, treat your body any way you want to treat it. When you get sick, come to us and we will give you a rabbit's foot.
Right.
We'll call that a prescription. And this little rabbit's foot, if you hang it around your neck, is going to make you well. You take this prescription, it's going to make you well. Well, what it's going to do is it's going to suppress the symptom that's indicating that you're sick for a while until it gets worse. Mm-hmm. And then when you come back, we might give you a little radiation, we might give you a little surgery, but they have no training in nutrition, they have no training in how the endocrine system works together with the central nervous system. If you're going to keep the body healthy, you have to keep these systems functioning properly. And to top it off, they're going to fill your head with amalgam fillings, which are poison. Mercury is the second most toxic poison in the world. And we're also going to fill you up with vaccinations and immunizations. We're going to give you at least 139 live viruses and bacteria in the polio vaccine. So we got you good and sick by the time you're 2 years old.
So how do we survive?
We have to separate from all this. We can't vaccinate our children. We educate our children at home. We get our teeth fixed with ceramic fillings and other things that are non-toxic to us. We eat food not from the grocery stores. We stay out of the grocery stores because they're places of poison unless you know you're getting pure organic food there. We don't eat anything homogenized or pasteurized. We have raw goat's milk. We have raw butter. And we don't adhere to these false fears of salmonella.
Right. Well, that's how they get by putting all the additives in our food, is to protect us. Everything is emotion based. I mean, silly things, and I say silly, but gun control is not about guns. It's about freedom. But they use emotion to stir people up, saying, if we do this, this happens good.
The Jesuit Conference has, for at least 20 years, been against the American citizen owning a handgun, a rifle, and a shotgun. That's the Jesuit Conference. That's their official position.
Well, I could understand why.
Because you can't have an inquisition when people own guns.
Well, there's 700 million guns in the United States. That would tend to be a problem, I would think. So, is that... I mean, let's assume that this is all planned for a basic takeover of the country, and I'm going to say assume, because
well, that's what they've written.
Okay, that's what they've written.
They've written.
They're not going to get there as long as we're armed with knowledge and with weapons. And I'm not a gun nut; I could care less. But if we have knowledge, they lose, right?
Well, you need the knowledge, but then you need historically in the past, you need to have the Bible in your language so you can pray to the Lord and seek His face so He can answer your prayers. And then you need also a gun, because we white Anglo-Saxon Celtic Calvinists are the only ones who won for ourselves political liberty, and we did it with first the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, and then we did it with also the sword of just defense. That's what John Knox called it when he spoke against Mary Queen of Scots. So you need the sword of the Spirit was protected with the First Amendment, and the sword of just defense was protected with the Second Amendment.
Right. So that basically boils down to a spiritual thing.
Right.
Is as far as I'm concerned. And there's a lot of people, and then they throw up this argument also. They say, well, the Bible means this exactly, that they've described one God. But yet there's other people that say their God is this, and these people say their God is that. But yet their God is teaching the exact same thing everywhere. So it's really, it doesn't matter what you call them. It's the same God, basically.
Well, it does matter, because we're going to speak historically now. The Dark Ages were all across Europe. English, French, German, Dutch, Spanish, Italians. They were all under the heel of the Pope. The Pope ran the kings. The kings ran the people. Okay, that's how the Dark Ages ran. Well, how did we get out of the Dark Ages into the modern era? Well, it started first with the revolt in Holland, with what later became the Dutch Republic, when there were great revivals and men were preaching from the Bible, and many thousands of Dutchmen were getting saved in open air preaching. And as a result, then these Dutchmen said, we have a word from God here in the Bible, the Word of God. We don't need the priests anymore. And so this greatly upset Rome, and so the Jesuits used Philip II of Spain to send 10,000 crack troops into Holland in an attempt to destroy the Reformation in Holland. But after an 80-year civil war, in 1648, we finally have the birth of the modern era, and Holland's a free nation.
Right.
So, but we don't have that in the Orient. We don't have that in any Catholic nations. Catholic nations have not been able to set up truly free republican forms of government where the government has a limited power.
Well, we tried that originally.
We did it. We succeeded.
We succeeded, but we lost it.
We lost it in the war between the states.
Right.
When the Jesuits brought many, many, many Irish Roman Catholics over here, settled them primarily in the northern cities, and then fomented the war, which the North was predominantly a Roman Catholic bloc, because there were 200,000 Irishmen that died on the side of the North. according to Dabney in his Defense of Virginia in the South. And so it was primarily the Protestant South that they fought. And the states being Georgia, North and South Carolina, and Virginia, those were the Protestant states of the South, and those were the states that Sherman and Grant totally destroyed. They didn't destroy primarily Catholic New Orleans or Catholic Florida. They destroyed the primarily Protestant southern states.
Right. So, in a nutshell, basically what you're saying is the Civil War was in fact about slavery. It was about making everybody slaves.
That's right, and that's exactly what Horace Greeley said, and I quote it in my book. Horace Greeley said, "We've made both the whites and the blacks the slaves of our government in Washington."
Right.
And that's exactly what we have today.
But yet you go to the textbooks in third grade and it says, Civil War, good old Abe Lincoln freed the slaves. That's what it was all about.
Yeah, and that's utterly ridiculous. Lincoln told the South, you can have your slavery, just don't secede. And the Southern men said, you have afflicted us for so many years that we now are going to secede. And Alexander Stephens, who was the vice president of the Southern Confederacy, said in his great work, Constitutional View of the War Between the States, he said that every state had the right to secede, and he named 3 states that reserved the right to secede in their ratification papers. And there were 2 northern states and 1 southern state. The 2 northern states were New York and Rhode Island, and the southern state was Virginia. Those states reserved the right to secede, and if those 3 states had the right, then all the others had the right.
Well, I would think so.
Because this is a union of consent.
Well, the Constitution, the way it was originally written, and the intent of it, to me, is very clear, and to many scholars, that a state could, in fact, secede.
Well, if you voluntarily enter into a union, well, then you can voluntarily exit that union if you're being abused and if the contract is breached.
Right.
And the North breached the contract many times.
Yeah, and now they come along, and many of the states from the Honest Abe on that came into the Union came in on a different footing. Came in, every single one of them is a little different. Nevada is a prime example, and it's going on right now. Nevada, 13% of Nevada was admitted as a state. 87% of Nevada was admitted as a territory. It was kept. They kept 87%. And to this day now, they put it in writing. This is our territory. And so this is what's going on. Every state, New Mexico has something different. Idaho's a little bit ticked, and California's asleep. I don't know what they're doing. But this is what they're finding out. They did this to the states.
We have to keep these things clear in our head. From 1789 to 1868, we had a Protestant Calvinistic republic where the Constitution was a grant of limited express powers, and there were no implied powers in that document, including the establishment of a national bank, right, contrary to that particular case. I think it was Marbury versus Madison. Mm-hmm. In any event, after 1868 to the present, we are now in a Jesuit empire. All the states are provinces. We don't have sovereign states. They're simply provinces of the great central city, Washington, D.C., because that is a Roman form of government. Just like the Roman government of old, Rome was the center city, and all the different countries were provinces of the Roman Empire.
Right.
They've made this empire exactly the same way.
Exactly.
And then they used this empire to restore the temporal power of the Pope around the world with our wars from 1900 to the present.
Mm-hmm. But it is not the Catholic people.
Oh, no.
That's what most people will take offense of. They say, well, I'm a Catholic, I don't do that. Well, it isn't the Catholic people. It's like, and I had this argument not too long ago. Somebody came up and said I didn't care for the platform of a particular political party. I won't mention their name, just their color was green. But I said I didn't really like this platform. But yet the people, and I met thousands of them, many of them, they're fantastic. They're wonderful people. They're all heart. They care. I mean, from their heart. They care like you wouldn't believe. But the platform says something different. And so, for people to judge or for everybody else to judge the people by the platform, I don't like. The Jesuits are predominantly Catholic, so I don't like Catholics, is absurd. It's like saying I don't like you because you're a white guy. I've got a tan now. You're a white guy, you know?
I do need a tan.
Well, you do need a tan. Yeah, that's true. But the fact is, the media-driven frenzy is splitting everybody and saying because you say you're a Catholic. I mean, I was born and raised in the Mormon Church. It's not that I don't have any use for them now. It's that I don't follow that reasoning. I have found something that's I like better, but I don't dislike Mormons.
We need to set up this dichotomy. The Roman Catholic people are a group, the hierarchy is another group, and the Jesuit order is above it all. Okay?
Right.
I have not a beef with Catholic people. As Cromwell said, I quarrel with no man's conscience. If that's the way they wish to believe, we have a First Amendment here, and they have the right to believe how they wish to believe. I have a quarrel with a group of men who have conspired to take our government from us, to subject us to a foreign monarch, and that's exactly what the Pope is. I call the Pope the Papal Caesar. He's a foreign monarch in the law. The Pope cannot be sued. He is a sovereign. He governs from a palace. He lives in a sovereign nation called the Sovereign State of Vatican City. He has ambassadors to every country of the world. They have their own money. He has his own bodyguard. It is a nation, okay? So I have a problem with a foreign king governing my country. And because I'm a patriot, I believe that America should be governed by Americans, Japan should be governed by Japanese, Germany should be governed by Germans.
Right.
We believe in nationalism. We believe that a people should govern themselves, not a foreign monarch. And this is what the Jesuits have sought to establish. And they will kill their own Roman Catholic people to do so. And the example to this is John F. Kennedy. He was the first Roman Catholic president we had because he disobeyed the Pope, he sought to end Cardinal Spellman's Vietnam War, and he sought to end the reign of the CIA, which is nothing more than an extension of Hitler's SS. They killed him for it.
Well, he also printed...
and he went against their Federal Reserve Bank.
against the Federal Reserve Bank,
That's right.
the central bank. I mean, that's...
And he also was against the voucher system, which Mr. good old George Bush is ready to okay.
Right.
Kennedy was dead set against the voucher system, which Cardinal Spellman wanted.
What about Honest Abe? I know that he started printing the greenback to pay the war debt.
Abraham Lincoln defended Charles Chiniquy, who was a priest who was being framed by the Jesuits. You can read about it in 50 Years in the Church of Rome. Abraham Lincoln was his defender, and he wrestled Charles Chiniquy away from the grasp of the Jesuits in destroying Chiniquy. And Chiniquy told Lincoln that when I looked in the audience, I saw the sentence of death on no less than 11 Jesuit faces in the audience. And from then on, Charles Chiniquy, Father Chiniquy, used to go and warn President Lincoln every year of his impending assassination by the Jesuits. So my point with Lincoln is that Lincoln did some things that were very wrong. He instituted martial law. He overthrew the government of Maryland for the most part. He would not let Maryland secede when Maryland wanted to secede. He did some things that were very wrong and very absolutist. But after the Battle of Gettysburg, I am told that he had a change of heart and he truly repented of his sins and believed on Christ, and then he sought to set things right. And one of the things he sought to do was his refusal to centralize the United States into an empire, because he refused to ratify or promote the 14th Amendment, just as President Johnson refused to promote the 14th Amendment after Lincoln was assassinated.
Yeah. Well, when did the 14th Amendment come?
1868.
1868.
July 28,
Under whose watch?
President Johnson.
Okay.
July 1868, July 28, 1868 was the day Washington's Republic formally ended, and when the empire began. And it was proclaimed ratified when it was not in fact ratified. And Pendleton of Ohio said, if the southern states have fought against this, then they're all heroes. And he was a congressman from the state of Ohio.
Yeah. But the 14th Amendment basically creates the corporate citizen. Is that...
See, in the Dred Scott decision, when the Roman Catholic Chief Justice Taney delivered his decision, which was a good decision, he said that we were first citizens of our state, and then citizens of the United States.
Right.
And the privileges and immunities of that subordinate and derivative United States citizenship included the Bill of Rights. That means that the Bill of Rights was an absolute limitation on the power of the federal government.
Right.
We had to go to trial with a jury. We could not have any unlawful search and seizure, et cetera, okay? When the 14th Amendment was ratified, it reversed, or was declared ratified, it reversed that. And it made your U.S. citizenship primary. And your state citizenship a privilege of this new U.S. citizenship. And 4 years later, in 1872, with the slaughterhouse cases, the radical red Republican Supreme Court decreed that this new 14th Amendment citizenship did not include fundamental rights, later said to be the Bill of Rights. And if the Bill of Rights are no longer privileges and immunities of your U.S. citizenship, well, our citizenship is no different than Russian citizenship or any other citizenship, because everything you do is a privilege.
Right. So when you walk in the courtroom and you're waving the Constitution and the judge kind of chuckles at you, he's right.
The judge is right.
He's absolutely right.
The judge has his flag that's trimmed in gold fringe, his federal flag. That's the flag of the commander-in-chief. He has a state flag that's trimmed in gold fringe. That tells you the governor is the commander-in-chief of the state.
And this is written.
It's all written.
This isn't Eric Phelps making this up.
It's all written.
Because I've read this stuff too.
It's in Title IV of U.S. Code if you want to read about the flag, U.S. flag.
Right.
So it's all there. And the judge knows exactly what he's talking about. We're proceeding here under a form of military rule. The Constitution has no stand here.
Exactly.
And so you're pleading of common law and jury nullification. All this is a joke to us, sir. We will proceed as the way we want to.
And that all started when the 14th Amendment actually reversed.
The 14th Amendment destroyed our status.
Right.
FDR, when he took our gold from us, destroyed the substance. And then with the Erie decision in 1938, that ended all general federal common law. And if there's no federal common law on a federal level, that's telling you there's none on a state level.
Absolutely not. And it also is, now the states have become subordinate to the federal government.
Correct.
Which is, again, a flip-flop, right?
That's right, because see, when the 13 colonies got our liberty after an 8-year war with England, and by the way, King George III was a complete and total pawn of the Jesuits. He protected the Jesuits all throughout England, gave Stonyhurst, or Thomas Weld gave Stonyhurst to the Jesuits, but after we won our independence, those 13 colonies became 13 sovereign nations, independent nations, and then when they ratified the Constitution, that created a federation of sovereign nations for certain limited purposes. So if any country attacked Delaware or Rhode Island, New York would intervene, Pennsylvania would intervene. So it's a wonderful form of government, and it was described by Pelatiah Webster in his great thesis as to our form of government.
And it worked.
Sure, it worked.
Worked for
We became the most powerful nation in the world in a mere 80 years.
Right. It was like overnight. The growth was phenomenal. The production was unbelievable, but now they've reversed it again.
That's right. They've destroyed the middle class,
and
taken the Bible out of public school.
At you and me sometimes like we're nuts. But I've got to say that there's an upside, because now they're looking at you and me and saying, you know, that's starting to make sense, and they're reading a little bit. And if you'll read Eric's book, as I did, it's fantastic. I mean, here it is. It's not, here's what I think, it's here's what all the paperwork says, here's what history says, here's what everybody is saying and writing down and doing.
And as an aside, I do have a hard time with spelling and some punctuation and a little bit of prose every now and then. And a Jesuit bought a manuscript. An ex-Jesuit had been a Jesuit for 10 years. And he liked the book very much. He says he's been waiting for it for 20 years. And he was kind enough to put in all the corrections that he found in the book, which was nearly 75 corrections. And we got them all corrected, and it's in the perfected volume now. So I'm very thankful to a man who was a Jesuit for 10 years.
Now, along with your book, you also have a CD-ROM that has old books you don't you don't find in the library. What are these, and what's the reason for them?
Okay, there are very few books written on the Jesuits that describe their order, how it worked, and their history in the past. You'll look high and low to try to find them, but the ones I have are, I feel, the best after 20 years of research. The first one is Dowling's History of Romanism, which is the greatest history of Romanism from the time of its inception, from Constantine 312 to 1845. The second book is Niccolini's History of the Jesuits, which was an Italian Roman Catholic who got saved, came to know Christ of the Bible, and he became involved in the Italian Revolution. He was driven from Italy when the Pope was brought back to power by Napoleon, and he wrote his history from England as an exile. Another history is R.W. Thompson's Footprints of the Jesuits. He was the only American that ever wrote a history on the Jesuit order, some 500 and so pages. Another history, and it's an extremely hard book to find, it's M.S. Cusack's The Nun from Kenmare. She wrote a book called The Black Pope, and it's nearly impossible to find. I found it in a library. The book was not cataloged yet, and I copied it, and the only other copy that we can find on the internet is in the British Museum, and you cannot check that book out. You must read it there. Another book is The Engineer Corps of Hell, written by Edwin A. Sherwin. He was a 33rd degree Freemason, and there were some Freemasons who genuinely thought the Masonic Lodge was against the Jesuit order. This man was one of them, and he reprinted the Secreta Monita. He also reprinted some of the maxims of the order. There's another book written called Popery, Puseyism, and Jesuitism by Luigi de Santis, who was an official censor of the Inquisition in the 1850s. He tells of the Inquisition there in Rome when the Italians opened it up and they found people that had been walled up to die. And they found people buried in dry lime up to their necks and left there to die. It's a book also, it's a book of conversations between the Waldensian, who's Mr. Sweetman, and a few others, and you find it totally intriguing. So all these books total 4,200 pages. You'll find them in addition to the book that I have here. You can download, do whatever you want to.
You got 800 pages in your book?
700.
700. Now you got a lot of pictures too.
I have about 130 pictures. And one of my points in the book is that the Vatican controls all the intelligence agencies. The Vatican controls the CIA, the KGB, the Mossad, the BND of Germany, the British SIS, MI5, MI6. They controlled all of the international intelligence agencies through the Knights of Malta. I have a picture of Donovan, who was the head of the OSS at the time, in the Vatican getting St. Sylvester's Medal from the Pope, which is the highest award the Vatican can give, for a lifetime of secret intelligence services to the Vatican.
Yeah, and you've got a picture.
I've got a picture of it.
And that's in your book.
And it's in my book.
What about some of the organizations? And let me pick on a couple, because there are a few organizations that I believe promote not anti-American, but things that aren't in line with the Constitution. And one of my favorite animals is the Bar Association. Where did that come from? If you have to be a member of the Bar Association to go in the courtroom, in certain instances you can go pro se, but if you're going to go in the courtroom, you have to be a member of the Bar Association if you're going to represent somebody. And if you're a member, then you have all these guidelines. Many of these guidelines are anti-client, who, by the way, is the one that pays the lawyer. Where did this come from? And what's the reason for it? Do you have any input on that?
In my experience, I've discovered that the whole legal system is an outgrowth of the 14th Amendment and the abolition of the English common, or the common law procedure that we have. Yeah. When you have a lawyer, you have declared yourself incompetent, that you cannot defend yourself.
Right.
And the courts are not a place of justice. They're a place of business.
Right.
So if you want justice, the courtroom is not this place to seek it. And so the courts today are the place where they encourage crime. They don't punish crime. See, one of the Bible's maxims is that the Lord instituted capital punishment for murderers. Murderers are to die, according to Genesis 9:6. And when a country does not punish its murderers, when they don't give capital punishment to murderers, they're inviting more murder. That's why you can go to Saudi Arabia and you can lay $10,000 out on a cot and it will be there a year from now, because if anybody picks it up, they're going to have their hand cut off. That's the purpose of government, to punish crime. Mm-hmm. So all the police, when they do their job and they get these people out of the society so they don't hurt us, and now they're incarcerated, the judges are there to give them the minimal amount of punishment as possible. so that encourages more crime, and so we can have more prisons. And it's because the Pope doesn't believe in capital punishment, these prisons will ultimately serve as inquisitional institutions.
So basically, no punishment for crime.
No punishment for crime. And the majority of courts that I've been in, at least back in Pennsylvania, are all controlled by Shriner Freemasons. I haven't been in a court yet that the chief judge is not a Shriner. And that's Harrisburg, that's Lancaster, they're all Masons.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know what, I know what the judges around here as in general do. I can't speak for all of them, but I don't know their associations. But so I want to go back to this 14th Amendment thing, because many people have come to me and asked me why I say some of the things I say. One thing that I do say is, no, I'm not a United States citizen. And they say, oh, wow, you're calling yourself an American, you're not a United States citizen. No, I'm not.
Well, they don't understand that there are two United States.
Right.
There was a United States of Washington from 1789 to 1868, these United States of America.
Right.
And then there's the American Empire called the United States.
The United States.
And when I say I'm not a U.S. citizen, I say I'm not a 14th Amendment citizen.
Right.
Because in my book I called this empire the Holy Roman 14th Amendment American Empire. That's what we have.
That's exactly what
Okay,
we
and
have.
I don't claim any allegiance to it. I hate this government. It is a usurped government. It is a criminal government. It is run by foreigners, the Pope and his Jesuits, who control through the Council on Foreign Relations. We are not self-governing. We have no elections. That's all a hoax. It's a complete and total farce in Florida about this recount. It was just an excuse for the Supreme Court to interject more authority than what it normally had. And Dershowitz just came out with a book called, what was it? Supreme Injustice. And Alan Dershowitz is absolutely right on this point.
Mm-hmm. So how do we educate people? I mean, besides reading your book, how do we get them to understand? And if the masses did understand what has transpired, what's happened here, what do you think they're sufficiently dumbed down from all the crap in their food and their water and the air, and or do you think they might react?
Oh, I'm always optimistic. Okay.
Yeah.
I believe as long as we can read the Bible, we can read the King James Bible, we read it in our own language, we pray and we seek the Lord, and we have our own decision. We don't need anybody to tell us what that means. We don't need any interpreters, we don't need any priests, we don't need any Protestant pastors. We have a mind, we can read, and God will show us what He means as we read His Word.
Yeah.
So as we read His Word, then we pray, and the Lord gives us courage to do what we need to do, and as each man begins to do that, then things will begin to change.
Right.
In your area where you are, no matter where you are, if you're a guard in a prison, you begin to do right things. If you're a policeman, you begin to do right things. If you're a lawyer, you begin to do right things. If you're a judge, you begin to do right things. If you're a president, if you're a governor, you begin to do right things. And then as this whole mechanism begins to do right things, then things happen.
Well, evil can't survive surrounded by good. In an influence of good, evil cannot survive. And so that's what you're saying.
Well, light always dispels darkness.
Right.
And whenever men and women do that which is right, then good things always happen, because we have the law of sowing and reaping. Mm-hmm. What you sow, you reap. You sow good things, you'll reap good things.
Right. So you think the judges and attorneys will come around?
Hey, we had a Reformation 500 years ago. You think it's bad now? We should step back in the Dark Ages when nobody knew how to read, when there were no books in the hands of the people. The only way the people knew anything was from the stained glass windows in the church and what the priest told them. Mm-hmm. They had no idea of conveying property. They had no knowledge. They were illiterate. The Protestant Reformation got the Bible in the hands of the people. They became literate. Their middle class arose. They became, in art, they started sciences. We have the discovery or the creation of the microscope and a series of other things. We have culture, middle class trading, the growth of industry and commerce, because the Bible was put into the hands of the people. Mm-hmm. When a man starts reading that book, he begins to change.
Yeah. And you don't have to be a member of organized religion to read
Absolutely
that book.
not. Organized religion, for the most part, is controlled.
But you know, media or whoever it is touts that particular book as being a controlling factor. They say, well, if the Bible, and they make people out, when you mention read it in the Bible, they make people out to be relying on some fiction.
Okay, well, my response to that is, you give me one example in history where men came out of tyranny and instituted freedom without that book. Give me one example.
Well, don't ask me.
There aren't any.
There aren't any.
There
and
aren't
I
any.
understand that. But how do you convey that to people?
Then you have to tell them historically.
Because you have been granted a label. And I've seen it. You walk into a situation, into a room, and you say, the Bible says, everybody's already got their opinion of you. Well, this person can't think for himself because he's quoting the Bible. And this is what they have put out there. When in fact, you're quoting the Bible to or make your point that this is the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do we get over this media-driven hysteria that's created, or this labeling?
Well, we have to understand where the media is coming from. The media is controlled by the Knights of Malta. NBC, CBS, and ABC is controlled by the Knights of Malta. In the days of the Kennedy assassination, it was Henry Luce. Mm-hmm. Henry Luce was the most powerful Knight of Malta, the press lord of the country. And so, of course, they want to dissuade us from using the Bible because that is the tool that kept them from having absolute power.
But that tells me that if, in fact, people become educated and enlightened, the bad guys don't have a chance. That's what it tells me. That they have to work constantly to feed us this barrage of garbage, and to try everything they can in every way they can to influence us, to educate us in a direction where we are a 14th Amendment servant.
Right.
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think that they believe, without this constant barrage on us, that they're going to maintain this control. I think they know that we're bright enough to come out of the dark if we've been kept in there.
Well, the American people are the last people in the world that they have to conquer with a revolution.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese, 50 or 60 million of them have been murdered.
Right.
The Russians, probably another 40 million of them have been murdered. The United States has yet to experience the bloodbath that those nations went through.
Right.
If we have that bloodbath that they're planning on, then we will be a subjugated nation just like they are.
Yeah.
But we will have deserved it because we didn't want to read the Bible anymore, and we thought we were smarter than God, and so we're going to do what we want to do, and the result of that is the Jesuits and Satan, and I believe there is a literal person called Satan, and he uses the Jesuit general and his high Jesuits to control the world. They will have won again.
Mm-hmm. But will they, ultimately?
Well, no, ultimately the Lord Jesus Christ will return at the end of this Daniel 70th week on a white horse, a two-edged sword that proceeds out of his mouth, and smite the nations with it that come against his Jewish race that the devil is seeking to destroy every last Jew in the world at the Battle of Armageddon. And then he will implement this 1,000-year reign promised to David, which is the Davidic covenant. And then he'll rule the world for 1,000 years.
1,000 years at a time, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you want to talk about the mafia or any of this?
Sure.
Okay.
Why not?
One of the other gentlemen wanted to talk about that.
What about the mafia?
Okay, the mafia is controlled by the Archbishop of New York. The 5 mafia families of New York, the commission, according to Giovacci, that commission is subject to the Archbishop. And one of the things I mentioned in my book is that Lucky Luciano, with his operation that he engaged with the Navy to secure a safe landing of the U.S. Navy on Sicily during World War II, he was released from prison in 1946 through the efforts of Cardinal Spellman. So we have the Cardinal of New York with enough power to have the U.S. government pardon Luciano and send him back to Rome, back to Italy. So we have Luciano, the mafia, the most powerful mafioso at the time, the bosom friend of the Archbishop of New York. We have a tie between Frank Costello and Joe Kennedy. Frank Costello later became the chief mafioso of New York. He and Joe Kennedy were close. And then after Costello, they attempted his life when Vito Genovese came back to power in New York. Vito Genovese, while he was a fugitive and a fugitive from justice in the United States, he was the right-hand man of Benito Mussolini, and Mussolini's confessor was a Jesuit, priest Venturi. So we have Mussolini, a fascist, with the Jesuits, and Genovese, all bosom friends. So we have a connection between the Mafia and the Jesuits and the Archbishop of New York.
And when Joe Kennedy lost out, then we all know what happened with that family, where the direction that they went.
With Joe Kennedy.
You said Costello and Kennedy were in contention for leadership.
No. Costello was in contention with Genovese for leadership.
Oh, okay.
And when Vito Genovese came back and put a hit on Costello, Costello was shot in the head, he was grazed, he resigned, and then Genovese took over. And so my point is that the Archbishop of New York controls the Mafia Commission. That means he controls all the pornography in this country. He controls all white slavery in this country. And there was a man by the name of Jeremiah Crowley, who was an Irish priest who got saved, came to know the Lord, and he wrote a book called The Pope, the Chief of White Slavery, High Priest of Intrigue. It's nearly impossible to find that book. I have a copy of it. And in that he describes the organized prostitution that the Vatican controlled in this country, which later was given over entirely to the Mafia.
Okay, so what you have had to say is pretty heavy and pretty far out there. And I'm sure there's a lot of people headed for other channels right now. However, I think all of this has to be said, and I think that anybody out there that if this is of a concern to you, if you think this is, I mean, if there's even the smallest chance that this is all true, and I'm not saying it's not, you have to find out for yourself. I mean, I don't know why people will think, I don't like that, so I'm not going to deal with it or believe it.
Well, one way to find out is to read this book, Vatican Assassins, Wounded in the House of My Friends. I have an embossed seal of the Jesuit order that you can find on the internet. And then on the back, I have Kennedy here. And then I describe the assassins for the Black Pope, all these Knights of Malta that I name. I name J. Peter Grace of the Grace Commission under Ronald Reagan. I name Henry Luce. I name William F. Buckley, Jr., who still lives. I name John McCone, who was the head of the CIA at the time of the Kennedy assassination. I name William Casey, who was later the head of the CIA, and I have a picture with Casey with the Jesuits at Fordham in my book, Fordham being a Jesuit university in New York. I have a picture of James Angleton, who was chief of counterintelligence, worked with the Mossad and the KGB in the person of Kim Philby. I name Lee Iacocca, who was involved in the Kennedy assassination. He still lives. He dispatched his security chief, Carl Renas, to drive the limousine from Washington to Cincinnati to have all the evidence of primary strikes removed. I name the Dallas Bishop Thomas Gorman, who was also Knight of Malta, and this Thomas Gorman controlled the Dallas PD and the mayor. Mr. Cabell, who was the brother of Charles Cabell, who was the second in command of the CIA, who was relieved of command by Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs fiasco. So I name all these Knights of Malta that were in high places of authority at the time of the Kennedy assassination, and then I tell of Kennedy and Spellman and Nixon. So I think you will find it very interesting. It's 8.5 by 11. The book is written for World War II veterans. It's in very large type so you can read it easily. Lots of pictures, over 130 pictures. And you will see how you were used in World War II, that World War I and everything between World War I and World War II, I call it the Second 30 Years' War, from 1914 to 1945, was a crusade. It was a crusade of the Pope, financed to increase his temporal power in Europe and throughout the world, and also to establish the Zionist nation of Israel. And Zionism is controlled by the Jesuit general, and for the purpose of taking the Dome of the Rock, blowing it up, and rebuilding Solomon's temple for the Pope.
Well, so the only real war that this country has had would be, well, actually two that's coming to me, the Revolutionary War and the Civil War.
That's right.
Those were wars.
Those were true wars. They fought with the intention to win on the side of Washington. And remember, without the great state of Virginia and with the help of France, we would have never gotten our freedom. And then the war between the states, it's not really a civil war, it's a war between the states, two sovereign nations, Confederate States and the South.
It was referred to as a civil war.
It's referred to as that.
Right.
And the southern people were fighting for their independence to have their own way of life.
Right. The constitutional way of life.
Constitutional way of life. And the North said, you can't secede, you can't leave this union.
Right. Because it was at that time that they were trying to institute the changes in constitutional government.
Right. There's a book written called The Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States, written by the great Samuel Morse, the founder of Morse Code. He wrote and published that in 1835, and he tells of a Jesuit conspiracy with Prince Metternich in the secret Treaty of Verona to overthrow our Constitution, to overthrow the liberties of American citizens. And so that was already in the making, and he exposed it. The first was the tariff issue, the second issue became the slavery issue, and they divided the country unconstitutionally in 1850 with the Missouri Compromise. That was a criminal act, should have never been done.
Okay, one last thing, we're running out of time. To go back to this United States citizen, this 14th Amendment citizen that was created, how do you get around that, or can you get around it? Can you become a sovereign citizen?
I don't use the term sovereign citizen. I did it 12 years ago. Excuse me, when I understood this issue, I filed a unilateral contract under seal called a release. And you file your release in your county courthouse, and what you do is you abandon your privileges and immunities of 14th Amendment U.S. citizenship because you have the right under the law of contracts to abandon property. Once you abandon those privileges and immunities of U.S. citizenship created under the 14th Amendment, according to the law of contracts, particularly Williston on contracts, you revert back to your former status.
Okay.
When you revert back to your former status, you are now a citizen of the sovereign state of Nevada, and thereby a citizen of the United States. And the privileges and immunities of your citizenship of the sovereign nation state of Nevada include the Bill of Rights. That's the way it should be.
But it's effective. But you can't walk into court and say, I'm a citizen of the state of Nevada.
Well, you have to do your best, and you have to present your release there because it's stamped, it's under seal. You file it in the Recorder of Deeds office. It has to be filed with a third party. And you just get your certified copy and you present it in court and you show the judge, I've abandoned these privileges and immunities of 14th Amendment citizenship, and I'm no longer, therefore, subject to the jurisdiction, the in personam jurisdiction of this court, as evidenced by these flags.
Yeah, but then we're running out of time, then you get the giggles from the judge. I've seen them.
Nonetheless, what you've done is
Contempt of court.
Nonetheless, what you've done is the right thing.
Eric, it's been a pleasure. They're making gestures at us. We have to go away. Thank you very much for coming all the way from to Pennsylvania to share your knowledge with us. Everybody, find out what Eric has to say. Don't believe Eric, don't believe me. Go find out for yourself. We'll help you.